We interrupt this record to bring you a special bulletin. The reports of a flying saucer hovering over the city have been confirmed.
Did you really go out with an alien? Uh-huh. What was it like? Real different.
Becoming Human, a Mork and Mindy podcast. Hello, listeners. This is Paula Schaffner with episode 91, The Mork Report. This first aired on May 27th, 1982. The IMDb synopsis is, Mork bucks hard for promotion from leader Orson on planet Ork and unintentionally comes up with a report on how to stay happily married on Earth. An oddly specific description, like we don't know that Orson is the leader and Ork is a planet. And I don't know that it's unintentional. It seems like something that Mork worked really hard on, but roughly that's what happens. This was the only episode of the series directed by Robin Williams himself. It was the third script written by Winifred Harvey. Like her other two, this has a lot about Mindy, although I would argue not enough about Mindy, considering. We start with the nighttime exterior of the house. Mork is on the couch in his red and white nightshirt and cap, and he's summoning Orson. My guess is that this was a relatively new version of him summoning Orson. This indicates that it is probably pretty late at night. Mork introduces himself as Mork Wallace, Morky Safer, and Mork Reasoner, referring to the broadcasters of 60 Minutes at that time. It's unclear what person he is when we see the back of his head and he asks how his hair looks from the back. There are 4 clocks on the wall. The one for New York says 11 o'clock. The one for Paris says 5. The one for Tokyo says 1. And the one for Ork has 3 hands and numbers that go 1, 11, 111, a bunch of numbers that are too small to read, then 10, 10, and 11. The time difference between New York and Paris and New York and Tokyo is accurate. I just checked in. It would only be 9 o'clock, presumably 9 p.m. in Boulder at that time, but maybe Mindy went to sleep early. There's a screen within a screen, like on a newscast, and it says Mork Report, not The Mork Report, like the title of the episode. There's a gray table and a rolling chair. Mork turns around the chair and says, "Welcome to the expanded Mork Report," because usually, of course, when we do get Mork's reports, which we haven't had as much this season for various reasons, it's just the tag. It's relatively brief, while at this time it's the whole episode, and there isn't an extra tag on top of that. Mork says that this year's Observer thesis deals with the ever-burning question of our time, and then he does his surfer voice. So, how's it going in Mork and Mindy's marriage, okay? I guess he has to do an annual report with its own thesis for a promotion, because he says this year's Observer thesis. Orson tells Mork that this had better be good. Mork's promotion is riding on it. Mork says, "Oh yes, your ton of funness," so one of our last fat jokes of the series. Mork says, "Let's just run it up the flagpole and see if it sits, all right?" So sounding like a mid-20th century ad executive. Mork says, "Each year, sir, millions of couples enter into the state of matrimony. But getting married isn't the trick. Staying married is." And of course, when Mork and Mindy got married, Orson made it difficult on them by turning Mork into a dog, but he doesn't mention that. Orson, in my opinion, understandably asks why Mork can't do a thesis on something that Orson is interested in. Like, why do hot dogs come 6 to a pack and buns come in 8s? And that's still somewhat true, although the numbers may differ. It might be 8s and 10s. And of course, Orson has to ponder something food-related. Mork says that this is a little different format. He wants Orson to just try to stay with him. So maybe he hasn't done a full report before, or at least not to Orson. In Mork's experience, there are 4 main ingredients to a successful marriage. It's just a matter of blending them in the proper amounts, so he's comparing it to cooking. He says, take honesty, for example. It's always the best policy, except when you have a psychiatrist with a big mouth. And of course, in the previous episode, Mindy said that Mork didn't know the meaning of deceit, but honesty is still a little shaky between them, as we will see.
Man. Puppy kiss didn't work. Mia? Little pooter.
As I was watching this with the frame around it indicating the screen and then that goes away, I guess Mork preserved these memories and then presented them to Orson rather than just telling him, because we've got the frame and also a narrative framing device. We can see Mork trying a puppy kiss on Mindy, but it doesn't work. And we get a glimpse of the blue and white bathroom. There are some things that happen in the bathroom, but mostly off screen in this episode. He calls her Little Pooter, not for the only time in the episode, and he also imitates a rooster. I noticed that when they have Robin Williams' directing credit on the screen, it lingers a little bit longer, like they want to emphasize that this is special, that Robin himself directed it. I don't know what he's doing or plan to do with the flashlight and the mechanical noises, but at first I thought, well, maybe it's Godzilla. But in any case, it does wake her up. She threatens him with her pillow and says he knows that this is her one morning to sleep. So I'm still baffled about her work schedule. Sometimes she's doing the late evening news, sometimes she's doing morning programs. I don't know how many days a week it is or which days. But when this memory happened, Mindy had to get up early in the morning. But he stops her from hitting him with a pillow by holding up a gift that has green wrapping paper with pink and white flowers on it. She smiles, sets down her pillow, and says, "Oh, is that for me?" So even though he's given her some dubious gifts in the past, it's still nice to get a gift. He hands it to her and she says, "Thanks, sweetheart, that's nice." They give each other a peck on the lips, and he makes happy noises. He says she's really going to thank him when she puts it on, and he tells her to go do that in the bathroom. He says he left the price tag on so that she'll know how much he really loves her. Even though we've had episodes about Mork learning that you can't prove your love through gifts, like when he was spoiling Mirth. She goes in the bathroom and he closes the door for her. He says he saw what was in the box and said to himself that that's my little pooter, especially if it's half price. He wasn't too sure of her size, which is surprising because at this point he's done the laundry, he's lived with her for 4 years, he knows what she looks like, but he didn't know what size to buy this in, so he needed to find someone who was built like her. He says he was lucky because he got a trucker who had a flat tire, and the trucker looked like her, only he had straight hair, and his feet were maybe smaller. And I think we've had an episode before where he said that he thinks she has big feet. She changes pretty quickly. It's only about 20 seconds later that the bathroom door opens.
Oh. What can you say?
Oh, Mr. Blackwell, eat your heart out. Look at this, man. It's a combination of Little Abner and everything I've ever seen before. Oh, honey, it's the history of vinyl.
Morgan, it's really unique.
Unique? It's a piece of art, man. Look at this. I mean, Roy Rogers gone berserk.
The audience doesn't really react to her outfit, and I'm not sure which parts of this episode were filmed before a studio audience. There's definitely one scene that I think is, but beyond that. Mork refers to Mr. Blackwell, who did annual lists of the worst fashions of the year, usually people in music or other aspects of showbiz. I know that Dolly Parton was on his list, for instance. Mork refers to Little Abner because the off-the-shoulder look is sort of like the character Daisy May in that old comic strip. Mork says that she's the history of vinyl because the outfit is made out of vinyl. And Mindy is trying to be polite. She says it's unique. Mork says that the sleeve that has the fringe on it is Roy Rogers Gone Berserk, which I think must be at least the third or fourth reference to Roy Rogers. I mean, I think we've had 2 or 3 references to his horse Trigger alone. Mork says he got the outfit at a boutique called Razor Lips, so sort of a punk-sounding name. He says they even had fiberglass underwear there. Hopefully he didn't buy any of that for her. He calls her Min 3 times and tells her she could do a million things with this outfit. She says she can only think of one, and is probably burn it or throw it away. He calls her hun and says he's so excited. She looks so good in this. He wants to take her out dancing tonight. She stutters and then says she doesn't have the right shoes to go with it. He tells her, guess again. He pulls another gift box out from under the bed. This time it's got red wrapping paper with gold ribbon. He says that he bought them from a man named Bubba, which must be at least the third reference to the name Bubba. He opens the box and says, "Look at that, going up," because these are platform shoes or elevator shoes.
Well, they go. they go. Oh, Mork, I just can't accept all this.
Why not? You paid for it.
Hey, Daddy, did you give Mommy that present? Did you Whoa. I've never seen anything like that. I can just get a... Say cheese.
Cheese.
I know it sounds corny, but... Let's see, just one maybe a little...
Okay.
How about a sultry one, you know, kind of... Like this magazine stuff, okay? Neat? Hey, if I put the rope in front of the pictures, it'll look like you're hanging. Here we go. Gee, it's just like shooting a stick of wood.
The audience reacts a little more to the shoes than to the dress, and we find out that Mindy actually paid for it. Presumably Mork was using her credit cards. Mirth has an odd reaction to the dress. It's almost lustful, a little bit creepy. And he wants both his parents to pose in a sultry kind of way. He refers to the little string he would dangle a camera with. He refers to that as a rope and says it looks like they could be hanged with it, which is pretty dark. And Mork and Mindy are pretty amused by their son. But he doesn't think she's showing enough excitement as she poses, and he says it's like working with a stick of wood, which I guess is something a photographer would say about a model? I don't know. Mork tells Mindy to try to look festive. If these pictures look good, they can use them for their Christmas cards. Mindy wants Mirth to give her the film and the camera, but he refuses. He says he's got at least 7 shots left and 5 of Kitty flying from the main house to the garage. And then he makes the sound of the cat flying through the air as he exits. This is at least the second or third reference to Mirth having a pet cat that we never see and that he apparently abuses. I just have to say that I feel like I've heard more about their garage, even seen their garage this season, than in the whole first 3 seasons. Mork tells Mindy to put on the shoes and they'll go out and get a newspaper. I don't know if that's just he wants to walk out to the newsstand with her, or they'll get a newspaper and see what events they can go to this evening. He again says he's so excited. He says he can imagine going out, and then he stands on his tiptoes and looks up and says that he can ask her, "Honey, can you see the clouds?" Because she'll be so tall with these shoes. She has him sit on the foot of the bed with her. He puts his hand on her bare leg, just below the knee, and I noticed it was there for quite a while. It just seems more obvious because her leg is bare. She doesn't know how to put this. It's not as though she doesn't appreciate the thought, but this just isn't her taste. He says he knows, but he's tired of her taste. I'm just gonna say, I kind of like the dress. I wouldn't wear it myself. I don't think it's right for Mindy, even with her perm. I might want to lose that one sleeve, but it's got kind of an early 80s panache to it, and I could see some people getting away with it. Like Cyndi Lauper, it would have been fine on her. Mindy says this all was a very sweet gesture, but she thinks they should take the stuff back. I don't know if Razor Lips has an exchange policy. Probably doesn't, but it doesn't come up. Mork stands and says he doesn't believe her. He goes over to the closet and says, is she telling him that she would rather wear this schmata? And he takes out a nice lavender dress with spaghetti straps. Schmata is a Yiddish word that means a torn or old piece of cloth that's sometimes used as an insult for a dress that's kind of rag-like. And again, I think I sort of thought Robin Williams was Jewish based on Mork and Mindy when I was a child and a teen, and I can see why, because he just throws in Yiddish at random times. He can't believe that she won't accept his present. She calls him sweetheart and says that she knows what she's saying is hard to accept, but they love each other too much to live under false pretenses. And she feels a lot better just telling him the truth. He sarcastically says that he's glad she feels better. He hangs up the dress. She asks if he'd rather she lie. He says, absolutely. She asks, is that what you want our marriage to be? Never knowing what the other person's really thinking? He suggests she could have just waited a couple months and said she ruined it at the greased pig contest. And I don't know if that's because he's thinking of little Abner and Daisy May and Hicks. She takes his hand and says, first of all, she probably wouldn't have thought of that, which is true. Secondly, he's the only person she can be totally honest with. And I thought that was interesting. She can't be totally honest with her father or any of her friends. He is the one person. He says he understands now, and since she's being totally honest, he wants her to sit down with him. After they sit, he tells her she has the dress on backwards.
Sir, honesty is only one small link in the emotional chain which forges our relationship and allows these two life forms from two entirely different environments.
Let's go, Mork. I'm on the water diet. I can't stay in one place too long.
Of course, you're a theater in the round ship. We'll skip right over if there's noise in the middle of the night. Who goes and looks? And go straight to the next topic, respect.
I couldn't tell if they were implying that she's small-chested, especially since she looks down the top, or was it just that the dress is so weird you could wear it backwards and you wouldn't even know. In Mork's mind office, we still have the same cities listed on the wall. If I didn't mention it, that's like a newsroom. But now the clocks are those pink cat clocks with the big eyes. Orson is impatient because he's on a water diet, and I don't think we've heard about Orson being on a diet before, so maybe all these fat jokes are really getting to him. There is another fat joke because Mork calls him his theater in the round shipness, rather than a stage where there's the audience and then you're all looking one direction. The theater in the round, if you've never seen it, is where the performers are in the middle and the audience is in a ring around them, so it's more 3D, but I think it's just he's round. Mork was going to talk about who checks if there's a noise in the night, even though that doesn't really fit into any of his 4 elements. The next topic is respect. And I noticed that the applause for Fred and Cora includes cheers, because it's been a while since we've seen Cora. Mindy says she thought Aunt Eunice was very coherent for someone telling anecdotes under sedation. It doesn't explain who Aunt Eunice is. It could be one of Cora's many siblings. This is where they have been while Mork and Mirth were up to what they were doing, and it gives Fred and Cora a little bit to talk about, although I have to say the jokes are really corny and flat. Fred says he still doesn't understand why a 73-year-old woman would want a nose job. As he and Cora go to sit on the couch, Cora says she doesn't know. Maybe Eunice got tired of having Cub Scouts asking her if they could hold meetings in it. Mindy is amused. Fred calls Mindy honey and says they have dinner reservations. Mindy says okay, but this time Fred has to handle Mirth if they run out of cheesecake, and I can just picture him whining about that. She yells to Mork and Mirth that they're ready to leave for dinner. There's applause as Mork and Mirth descend the attic stairs, chanting and wearing blue bodysuits with leaves and yellow flowers attached, as you will shortly see.
Let's go. I gotta get gas.
Mork, what was wrong with the jacket I laid out for you?
This is our sacred, most sacred foliage festival. Oh, yes. The most sacred holiday in all of Orton.
Are we going or not? These coupons expire at 8.
Why don't you two go and have a good time? I'll stay here and mulch the boys.
Okay, we'll see you later, honey.
Have fun. Oh, dear. Oh, what a thrill. Eating alone with Fred. Well, maybe I can pick up a newspaper on the way.
Well, at least if she's reading, she won't be slipping her telephone number to the wine steward.
You can briefly see a camera on the left side of the screen, and I don't know if that's Robin's fault or it just didn't get edited well. Fred, at this point, just doesn't question it. He just wants to go to dinner. Mirth says that they're celebrating their sacred foliage festival. Mindy tells her dad and grandmother to go ahead while she mulches the boys. So another plant joke. And we see that Cora has to get in a dig on Fred and how boring he is, and that's the last we see of her. Then he retaliates by sort of slut-shaming her, or at least implying that she's a big flirt. After they leave, Mork demands to know how Mindy could ridicule his religion in front of her family. So he sort of has a point, but I'll get into this a little bit more. He says he's never been so humiliated. Trying not to laugh, she says she's sorry, but looking at the two of them gives her this incredible urge for spinach salad. Mirth hopes she's kidding about that. Mirth says their heritage is no joke. Their roots are one thing, and their leaves are another. Roots in the sense of family roots. We can see that Mindy is struggling not to laugh. Mork says that's right. He honors Mindy's religious holidays. He even fasted on Yom Kippur until he found out she wasn't Jewish. Don't know why he didn't realize that before. Still trying not to laugh, she apologizes again and says she should have more respect. She tries to sit down, but he makes her join their ceremony despite her protests. She says she can't even get an avocado plant to sprout, which seems odd because she's had all these ferns and other plants thriving in her living room. They have her join in their sacred dance, which is a slow version of the Hokey Pokey. Merce says some of the greatest Hokey Pokeys have been written by the greatest masters of Ork. In case you ever wondered what it's all about, now you know. She steps away. Ork takes his son's hand and says they'll have to go on without Merce's mother. She's a non-believer. They'll carry on the Fern Fest without her. Merce says okay. Mork goes into his televangelist routine, and he says he'll read now from the Sacred Book of Fern. There's a cut to Mindy sitting on the couch arm, laughing helplessly. Mork says the non-believers will believe. He says he will now believe, and yet you know. Those who have seen the foliage will believe. He says, let us leaf to Book 4 of Fern 1, so a pun on the leaves of a book. There's another cut to Mindy laughing helplessly. Mork says, but then this summer the brutal sun will beat down upon the land and make the little tiny plants wither and die. And he puts a little spin on the word wither. He says, oh no, it'll be like a Tennessee Williams play. And then he does his Tennessee Williams act. And he says, it's so hot. He never knew. And he fans himself with his hand. We've seen him do on other episodes. Mirth isn't doing much so far except watching him. He goes back to the televangelist character and says, but one tiny plant did survive, and we know it fought off the bugs that tried, and the heat, and the terrible, terrible calamities around. Is that not true, son? In a southern accent, Merce says, well, I hope to tell you it is. There's another cut to Mindy, now looking like she's in pain as well as amusement. Mork asks if she's snickery at them. She claims her lip had a little jump. He thinks she's mocking them.
A little jump? You're mocking us, aren't you, man?
I'm not. I was appreciating your ceremony.
I should hope so.
I am.
A bush is a terrible thing to waste.
But then,
Even though I don't personally find this funny, I did think it was cute that Robin and Pam are having a really hard time keeping it together. I mean, yes, her character's laughing, but he breaks character a little bit here, and he looks amused. And when he says that a bush is a terrible thing to waste, the audience catches the naughtiness of that, and she has an interesting facial expression as well. And that's a play on the United Negro College Fund slogan, a mind is a terrible thing to waste. Moore continues and says that a miracle did appear, and from the heavens poured forth great torrents of rain, or maybe testons of rain, who knows? And this is another Southern California joke. Torrance with ENTS, pouring down rain, and then the city of Torrance, which is sort of near Long Beach. And that's about a 45-minute drive to the city of Tustin, which is closer to Anaheim. And one man in the audience really likes that. It's possible it was somebody on the staff. Mork wants Mindy to help them by spraying them with water. He says it won't hurt her to do that. He says she'll become the rain. So with a smirk, she sprays them in the face.
Hit me about here.
and behold, oh yes, and the blossoms were born again upon Ork, and once again lush foliage thrived all over the planet, and Ork and brides no longer have to throw rocks and bouquets. Well, son, don't do that, you'll deflower yourself.
Even though the flowers bloom at navel level, it's a bit suggestive, especially when Mork tells his son not to deflower himself like he's masturbating. Again, Mindy and the audience have an interesting reaction to that. Mork and Mirth sing Amen, and then they do a little song and dance, which they pull Mindy into. At the end, the applause includes whistles and cheers. Mindy asks if it's all over. Mork says no, now they have the reception. They'll have to step on the paper cup, like stepping on a glass at a Jewish wedding. She says great, she's going to go fix her hair and get her beaded bag, like she's going to a fancy party. She exits to the bedroom and closes the door. Mork says, wasn't that something? You know, Mommy was really moved to tears. Mork says, you know, son, I think this has given your mother a new appreciation of our culture. But then we hear Mindy laughing for quite a while, including a cut to the bedroom door. A couple things I want to say about this scene, besides it's not funny, is that it's always a little fuzzy what religion is like on Ork. And Mork has never brought up this festival before. Maybe it's not celebrated every year. Maybe he wanted to observant now that he has a child, because sometimes people become more religiously observant once they become parents. This sequence is supposed to be showing respect, but Mindy doesn't respect their religion, and Mork doesn't respect that she doesn't want to participate in their religion. Just as the first scene wasn't much of an argument for honesty, this scene isn't an argument for respect, and we saw that Fred and Cora are not particularly respectful of each other, although they're not married. They're son-in-law and mother-in-law. When we come back from the commercial break, the clocks in Mork's mind office are now white cuckoo clocks, although they don't actually cuckoo. Orson reminds Mork that his promotion is writing on this report, in case we've forgotten what the premise of this episode is. Or maybe he's emphasizing that so far Mork has not really earned that promotion. Mork says the next ingredient is often the primary motivation for marriage in the first place. Orson guesses that her family has money, although of course he should know better. Mork is talking about romance. In too many marriages, the flame of romance flickers and dies, but his and Mindy's burns hotter than an aluminum bench in Cairo, referring to the heat of Egypt. He makes his hand sizzle on his own shoulder.
Cut. Mork, you're lying.
Sir, what gives you the absurd idea that I'd have to exaggerate about my love life?
You always lie in black and white.
It won't surprise you that this was my favorite part of the episode, although it didn't quite land for me as well as I wanted it to. It's presented like it's an MGM movie of the 30s, and it's in black and white, and we even have Mirth as the MGM lion. I wondered if this was the music from the original broadcast, because it felt off to me. It didn't feel even like a 30s pastiche. It was more like something that you would hear in a restaurant in the late 70s. It's not bad, but it didn't really fit the sequence. Mindy does look lovely in the feathered white dress. It's interesting in terms of their overall relationship. At first, she's the seductress and he's coy, and that continues even into the dancing, and we have seen that play out in different ways over the years, although since they've gotten married, he more often is the initiator for kissing or more. I don't think this part was necessarily filmed before an audience, or certainly they must have had to pause it at different points, especially if Robin was directing it. But the way it's edited, he just falls out of sight and then immediately rises up wearing a tux. But he's got a frilly apron on because he's been cooking in the kitchen. And they, of course, dance very well together, and we've seen that. But humor is, of course, included. And not just his. She gets to toss aside a dish when he's setting the table. And we get the symbolism of the pot boiling over because this is so hot. And then he takes off his apron and he becomes more masculine, I guess you could say, like when he lifts her. When Mirth comes in, he's dressed not like a waiter, but more like a penguin. And he's playing the violin, like he's a strolling violinist or something. And we get a smooch with Mork and Mindy. And then we fade out. It's in a heart shape. Orson assumes that Mork is lying. Mork denies lying about his love life, but Orson says that Mork always lies in black and white. So that's interesting, especially because we were told in the first season that they don't exactly lie, but they splink. But maybe when Mork lies in his reports, it's in black and white. This episode raises a lot of questions that will never be answered. The clocks now have Roman numerals, but the Orkin clock still has 3 hands. Mork says there are certain things between a husband and wife that should remain private. So even though he said romance is an important element, there's only so much he's going to tell Orson about his romance with Mindy. So Mork thinks it should be private, unless, of course, you're Mr. and Mrs. Eric Estrada. And that's going to be at least the 3rd reference to Eric Estrada and or Chips. And, of course, I went to Wikipedia. Estrada was married to Joyce Miller in November 1979. The couple divorced in 1980 and had no children. So I don't know if there was a scandal about that or if it was just a random reference. I would want to know about Eric Estrada's romance because he's so handsome. Estrada married twice more. Orson says this has been very educational, even though he just criticized what Mork told him. He says he'll get back to Mork on his promotion. Mork says Orson can't walk out now before the big finale. So this is a recipe, and it's a movie, and it's all these other things. The final ingredient is compatibility. According to Webster, a noun, state of existing together in harmony. See Mindy, comma, Mork, and. He turns and looks at the news screen. And again, we get the frame at the first part of what we see. Mork and Mindy are in bed, and she has a book, and he has a remote control. She tells him he watches too much TV. So it's like this is kind of in the middle of something. Maybe it was longer and it was edited down, or maybe, that's just a general observation. Mork watches too much TV. She suggests he read a magazine instead. Yes, maybe she thinks he doesn't have the concentration to read a whole book like she is. He says she's right, and he should catch up on his current events. He turns off the TV, puts the remote control on the bookcase, and asks if they have the new TV guide. Of course, that's the kind of magazine he would want to read. He wants to read about TV. No shame. I used to collect TV Guide for years because I watched way too much TV. She closes her book and says no, they don't have the latest TV Guide. She looks through the magazines on her nightstand. There's New Woman, Working Woman, Woman's Work, Woman's Life, Life with Woman, and Lady Beautiful. I'm not going to bother to look up if any of those are real. It makes sense that Mindy would be reading these kind of magazines because she is a feminist and she cares about her career, but she also cares about her appearance, so she'd be reading something like Lady Beautiful. Mork asks if she has any without Brooke Shields on the cover, so at least the 3rd Brooke Shields reference. Shields was a model as well as actress, so she was on a lot of magazine covers. Mindy finds one without Brooke and hands it to Mork. He thanks her. She gets her book again, and he looks at the magazine. One headline is Aphrodisiacs on a Budget. She looks mildly curious. And again, the audience didn't react much. I'm guessing it was a Robin ad-lib. Not explicit enough for the censor to worry about. Obviously, whatever women's magazine she handed to Mork includes stuff about sex. He opens to a page that to me looks like a comic, maybe even manga, but he says it's a compatibility test. They decide to take it together, but she warns him not to cheat. She sets her book aside and he gets a pencil. The first question is your spouse as affectionate now as when you first married?
Man?
So again, she is the more seductive one. She's giving him a big smooch, and he teases her by saying, like it wasn't that great, but of course it was. And the second question is, when you have an argument, who gives in first, you or your spouse? I did not want to transcribe this, but they argue about this for about a minute, even when she says she has a busy day tomorrow and she needs some sleep. So again, whatever her work schedule is, she's got to go sleep early. They both get out of bed, and she says that she hates when he acts like this. He tells her what he hates is when she gargles and she doesn't make any noise. He demonstrates. I can see how that might be mildly annoying, but hate is pretty strong. She says nothing annoys her more than when he goes to a salad bar without using a plate. And I could see that he would literally graze. What annoys him is when she gets out of bed and puts on those silly little ballet slippers. And there's a cut to Mindy's feet. And I've mentioned these slippers before, even though she wears different things to bed. We do see her in these slippers throughout season 4. I felt like one of the things that Robin is doing as a director is he has a lot of inserts. There's these close-ups to emphasize things like a door or her shoes. He asks her if she's going out for milk and cookies with Martha Graham, and he does a modern dance because of Martha Graham. She says it just so happens she's afraid to go barefoot in this house since he opened his home for battered lizards. Which is supposed to be funny, but my God, are people beating lizards in their neighborhood? This is tragic. He says that the lizards are the only ones who will eat her dip. Another episode where Mindy's cooking is criticized. When I thought of her going barefoot in the house, I thought of how Bebo used to chase after her, but nobody remembers Bebo at this point. Mork says besides he cleaned up after them, but nothing can be clean enough for her because she's neurotically neat. He says she washes the soap before she washes her hands. I actually know somebody who used to do that. She says that's ridiculous. To test her, he drops his nightcap on the floor. There's even a close-up of it lying on the floor. He does a little bit of his Groucho voice and says, say the magic word and the hat might disappear. Although on You Bet Your Life, the duck would appear, it wouldn't disappear. Mindy tries to resist, but eventually she grabs the hat and runs into the bathroom. He calls her Mind several times, running after her, but she closes the door and we hear a toilet flush. He's shocked. I just want to mention one of the things that was groundbreaking about All in the Family roughly 11 years before this was that it was the first time you could hear a toilet flush on television. And by the last season of the much more wholesome show The Brady Bunch, you could hear a toilet flush. That in itself is not particularly shocking by 1982, but he's shocked that she would flush away his clothes. She opens the door and shows her empty hands. He's even more shocked. He says right now some alligator's probably wearing his cap, and that's the thing about the urban legend that pet baby alligators were flushed down toilets and grew up in the sewer, and I think that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is a spin on that, even though it's turtles instead of alligators. She admits she didn't flush the cap. We see that she tucked it into the back of her pajamas. She hands it back to him and says she wanted to flush it, but he's happy again. He takes her hand and says that's what he loves about her. No matter how mad she gets, she'd never do anything to hurt him. So that's very sweet. Although we have seen her hit him and so on. She says she flushed his Batman toothbrush instead. And he says that's alright. His little bat wings were worn off anyway. So he's in a mood to forgive her. Batman was not especially popular in the early 80s. I mean, not compared to the 60s or later in the 80s. And I assume that this is just that Mork watches a lot of TV and we know he sometimes reads comic books, so that's why he has a Batman toothbrush.
Aren't we silly? I wouldn't trade these last 4 years for the world.
I love you, Pooter.
No, I love you too. Well. Who could possibly be as happy as we are?
Always good at making up.
Me.
Despite the fighting and everything, Mindy doesn't regret these last 4 years. She's really glad that she's had Mork, and he calls her Pooter again, and they exchange I love yous, and they have a nice hug. And they happily go back to bed, and it almost felt like now they're going to fool around, but we don't see that. Maybe because they're more private than the Estradas. Mork says that they're good at making up, but we also see that he has to get the last word. When we go back to his mind office, New York now has his orange and black shirt. I can't tell what Paris has. Tokyo has one of his shoes. Ork has a rubber chicken, which is ironic because Orkans aren't supposed to have a sense of humor, even though he had friends who were pranksters. So, again, the show is not very consistent, is it? The little news screen has the 4 ingredients listed on it. There's no longer a chair or table, and Mork is standing as usual. He says, "And so you see, sir, these are the elements which help make our marriage so successful. That and the fact that Mindy doesn't have a mother-in-law who says, 'Can't Mork live at home and you two just date?'" And he's doing a vaguely Jewish mother voice. I didn't know if he meant that Mindy doesn't have a mother-in-law, that is, Mork's mother was a petri dish and was not going to nag, or if he means Mindy didn't bring a mother-in-law into the relationship. And of course we know that he's had trouble with Fred all through the series. Some good times and bad, so it's not like he hasn't had in-law issues. Orson wonders why Mork bothers. It all seems like such a hassle. Mork admits sometimes it is. The work is hard and the hours are long.
Every time I look at Mindy, I see warmth, I see love, I see someone who makes me feel like I matter in this vast, lonely universe.
That was very touching. Thank you, Mork.
Oh, sir.
The grades will be posted on the bulletin board.
Oh, no, so I can't wait. I have to know, did I cut the mustard or do I get the promotion?
In hot.
Yep, we did.
Mork for Mork, by the power vested in me through the Grand Council and the JCs, I hereby grant you your stripes.
Sir, a master sergeant? You could knock me over with anorexic. Thank you.
You've earned it, Mork. Huzzah and Nanu.
Oh, Nanu, sir. Come on, fella. Come on, fella. Oh, I can't wait to take you home and sew you on my uniform. Come on. Yeah, boy.
So this is a very nice tribute to Mindy. Mork refers to the vast, lonely universe, and that's because he's a spaceman, but it's also just having somebody to love makes you feel less alone in the world and in the universe. And Orson is actually moved by this. You know, he doesn't believe in emotion, but Mork got to him after all this time. And he says the grades will be posted. So again, this is like Mork is trying to get his master's degree and he's defending his thesis, but he's also trying to get a promotion. But Mork, of course, has to know now. There's a reference to the Grand Council, and so I've talked about that some in the past. Orson is the leader, but I'm not sure how the government works, and there is a council because we know he's conferred with people. And JC stands for the Junior Chamber of Commerce. It's a civic organization. And on a series where we have had various animals, including a couple chimps, we end with a zebra because military stripes and then a striped animal. And we didn't have any guest stars, it's just the family and Orson, so we get a guest animal. And yes, there's a joke about anorexia. Mork plans to sew the zebra onto his uniform. So ending on another animal abuse joke. As I said, there's no tag. I will mention that if you look at the credits, you can see a bit of the black and white sequence in color. So here it ends. This was supposed to air before Gotta Run. Obviously, Mork would not be making a report about his domestic life when he is traveling through time, pursued by an angry, vengeful Neptunian. I don't know why they shuffled the order. Maybe they just wanted to end on something a little more normal and bring us back to the family, including Cora. But here we are. And it's a clip show that is not a typical clip show because it's not like the way Mork were, where and then there was a crazy thing that happened then. Oh my gosh, that was crazy. Scenes from various episodes over the years. These are clips that we've never seen before. I rate each of these episodes on a 0 to 4 egg scale because eggs are a huge part of Orkin culture. And at the time I started this podcast a couple years ago, eggs were not as politicized. And that scale represents how well it delivers what I'm looking for in the series. And I also rate each of these episodes on a 0 to 4 heart scale, which measures how well it promotes and supports the romantic relationship of Mork and Mindy. Usually, if it's a good heart scale, then that helps the eggs. But I found this the second weakest episode of season 4. There were moments when I thought, yeah, okay, maybe it's not a 2.5, could be 2 1/4, but I just have to go with 2 out of 4. There was the 1.5 for Rich Mork, Poor Mork, which had a whole episode about a weird boutique. I found a lot of the humor really flat. I didn't think that these were the best moments of their lives to represent how wonderful their relationship was. I didn't think that mirth was used well, although at least he wasn't dominating things, but he just sort of seemed a little bit lost. Like I said, the Fred and Cora stuff, although it's nice to at least get that last scene with them, it's like, why is that the last scene with them? I wish that they were there for something other than exchanging insults. Why couldn't we get something about Mork and Mindy how to fight, but they gave advice? I guess there's something to be said for Mork and Mindy fighting and making up, which they claim to do well. 2 eggs, and I'm going with 2.5 on hearts. It certainly is above average, but it's a little bit dubious about whether Mork has really learned anything about how to have a good marriage. I think he mostly does, but a lot of the credit has to go to Mindy because he's learned some of these lessons and then forgotten them. But there is some kissing and touching and hugging, and the dance sequence was very nice. The only other directing credit Robin has is for a 1986 comic relief special, which he did with his friends Whoopi Goldberg and Billy Crystal, and there was a lot of co-writing and co-directing and so on, so it wasn't a solo direction. He does okay, I guess. I mean, there were some nice overhead shots and odd close-ups. The composition of shots is fine. I don't know that he necessarily got the best performances out of himself and the others. For a rookie going, it's pretty good. I mean, Cindy Williams did a much better job when she did her one directing turn on Laverne and Shirley, but she had a better script to work with. And I don't want to be too harsh on Winifred Hervey. She did some nice moments with Mindy in present tense and Cheerleader in Chains, but I don't know, this episode just didn't work for me. We have Mork and Mirth in the costumes, and it's like, Even the televangelist thing, which felt so fresh when we saw him do that with Exodore when they met, it just feels a little stale. In a way, I can kind of see how they wanted to mix things up for season 5, but time ran out. The network was done, the audience to some degree was done. Robin obviously went on to a brilliant career, and Pam had some successes as well until basically retired to raise a family with Mark Harmon. They're still happy together. Don't know if they have the 4 elements, but some things are private. This doesn't feel like a last episode, but kind of also feels like, yeah, put the fork in it, we're done. Next time I'll talk about my thoughts on season 4 and the series in general, but this was the Mork Report. 2 eggs, 2.5 hearts. Nanu nanu.